All right. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. You are watching KUHS, the stream on Melody Drive, and this is the Weekend Boost. I'm your host, Paul Lane, and I'm so thankful to have you joining us today. Guys, usually I'd like to talk about past guests that I've had on the show, and today I'm just particularly excited. I'm going to talk about some people that I haven't talked about in a while, and I got to tell you, this is a fiction book. Dennis Ty was on my show a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, and oh my gosh, The Last Ride, it's a fiction. I wouldn't think it by reading it, but man, it seems like the real thing. It's a great story to read. One of my past guests, awesome legend in the Chicano Latino community, Ramon del Castillo, was on my show. It was just an honor not just to be on my show, but to know Ramon del Castillo. So, personal friend of mine and Dee is Robert Derby. Wrote this book, Inspiration from an Old American Queer. You know, we like to have a diversified audience, and we like to have diversified shows when we can. And Robert, a very dear friend of ours, and just wanted to show his book. Also, Kimberly Sanchez, wonderful author, wrote the book Love and Legacy, Amor Eterno. And it's a historical fiction novel. And I'll tell you what, if you like the works of Victor Villaseñor, pick this book up and read it. It starts in the 1500s and goes to present day. Excellent, excellent read. And the other one is, I had her on my show, on my last show, and Charlene Garcia, a historian, a genealogist, was on my show. She wrote this book, Orphan Stock. I mean, it's awesome to get to know the kind of people that come on this show. And guys, I know those of you that watch on a regular basis, thank you for being a faithful audience. I'm just grateful to have you. But I just want you to keep watching, because today's show is going to be even more exciting, I guarantee you. I'm the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. This is a book about the chronological order of my wife's passing, and you can reach me through the station. If you'd like to find out anything about any of these books, be glad to share them with you. I want to share one quick story. I used to speak in the Denver public schools for about 10 years. I was a motivational speaker, and I talked to at-risk kids all through the schools, and I did a lot of little analogies and stories, and one of the things I used to do is I would go into the classroom and I'd say, okay, what do I have here? And everyone agreed it was a silver dollar. And then I would ask the question, is it heads or is it tails? And everyone would look and they'd say, it's heads, yeah, it's heads, everyone agrees it's heads. And I'd say, no, I think you're all wrong, look, it's tails. It's heads to you, but it's tails to me. Every story has two sides. History is written by the victor. Your opinion is important, but the facts are more important. Today, I want to talk about historical fact. I want to talk about what my guest Rick Vigil is going to talk about fact. He's going to talk about history. He's going to talk about reality. And I want you to look at the other side of the coin. If you've never looked at Hispanic, Latino, Chicano culture, I ask that you open your mind today. And if you are a fan of this history and culture, brace yourself, because you're in for a ride. Rick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it.
So, Rick, you're from Antonito.
I'm from Antonito. I grew up there. I went to school there. My dad had a nightclub, which was a restaurant called the Golden Nugget. Mm-hmm. He was very, actually, he started really humble. He was a sheep herder, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then he always wanted to own his own business. And he was one of the first business people that brought in all these groups from New Mexico.
Wow.
Whether we talk about El Hurricane, we talk the Purple Haze, all those kind of people came to play there.
Wow.
And he also wanted to have his own band. So there's 11 brothers and sisters, so we had our own band. So he had a restaurant, he had the nightclub, all that kind of stuff. So I grew up there, and then from there he also wanted he wanted to record. So and then we got a chance to record in El Hurricane's studio, and they had their own studio. Yeah. We went to Alta Vista also, which is Herman Martinez, who had their own studio. So because you grew up in Antonito, you're more of a New Mexican type than you are to say Denver.
Mm-hmm. The manito.
Manito, the whole culture, the food, everything is all pretty much, if the border wasn't where it's at now, it would be New Mexico, Mm-hmm. But what makes it so special is the culture.
Yes.
And the people, you wouldn't know it if you went down to San Luis or you went to Antonito, those areas, you would think that that's New Mexico,
Yep.
you know? And that's the beautiful part is, and they don't change. I mean, I know the generations have changed and that kind of stuff, but within ourselves, we're still who we are, and that's what makes it special.
It really is. It really is. Now, I would guess that you're a historian.
I'm more, let me tell you, when I was growing up, I really liked listening to NPR.
Oh,
Because
me too.
I really liked the stories, your imagination, all that kind of stuff. Because in those days, you didn't have music videos or any of that stuff. And that's what made it really beautiful, you know. But the whole thing is that as I grew older, I wanted to do a lot more stories. But there wasn't never an avenue for it. There wasn't monies for it. So if you wanted to do oral history, you're on your own, buddy.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. So, and then when I had the opportunity to work in television, I thought, well, let's take it to the next level. And then when I went to work for education, because I also did education, and that was, creating modules for teachers and for parents and for kids. So, it was pretty well-rounded. So the whole thing is that it gives you a pretty good outlook of who we are. Because, I mean, a lot of the people that are in the education system, a lot of them are Spanish-speaking, you know? And it's nice for them. One of the things that was really nice, the program that I worked was the Rocky Mountain Said.
Okay.
And Rocky Mountain Said, with the help of Manuel Escamilla out of the Buenos Center, Ramon del Castillo, because he was part of that, El Martinez, all those people were, and they were really advocates, the whole thing, and everything was done in 2 languages. So when I would interview these parents, they were so proud, you know what I mean? They were no longer a number.
Yes.
They were somebody.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And see, historically, that's what's happened. They've been dehumanized.
Exactly.
Humanized, yes. And when we can express ourselves as a human being, this is my tío, this is my abuelo, this is my grandparents. Look at their story. Look how beautiful.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do these documentaries, because the generations of today and tomorrow, they're losing all that.
Oh, absolutely.
And the thing is I wanted to put a face. When we were at Rocky Mountain Said, Edward James almost came to see us.
Wow.
And one of the things he says, Rick, he says, television is a great medium because what it does, it plants the seed. For good, for bad, whatever it is.
Yes.
So and then I thought, wow, that's great. So and then because I was from the valley, I thought, says, you know what, someday I'm going to go back and I'm going to do some work down there. But the whole thing is like, the first piece that I did was, this one here, spirituality. And spirituality is about what happens with the Spanish people down in the valley during Holy Week. And there's all kinds of things that happen because it's all very traditional. So, and then I dedicated that to my mom, and I thought, okay, well, and because these materials are so expensive to create, so and then it took some time. But then I thought, you know what? There's more pieces around the valley that I'd like to be able to have the people tell the story.
Yes.
And that's what's important.
Yes.
It's not me doing the script and and it's all set up. No, this is pretty much having a relationship, because they're not just going to open up. You just
This is impromptu conversation.
Exactly. You don't go into a home and take a camera and people are just going to open up.
Yeah, they put up the shield, the guard.
Yeah, exactly. So they have to know who you are, and that takes time.
Yeah.
But once they do open up, it's wonderful because it's their words.
Yes.
And that's what. And so it's not always about dates and places. It's about content. And the whole thing is that's what's important, because when the generations of tomorrow look at this stuff, they're going to be able to put a face. And
Yes.
all these faces are a resemblance of any one of us, grandmother, grandfather, whatever that may be.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
the beautiful part. And how it happened to be that we lost our language, and how it is that the generation of today sometimes are afraid to speak the language, And that's so sad, because we're living in a global area where, in a global world where, I mean, dual language, I mean, my goodness, I mean, that's so special.
So advantageous. It's so
Oh,
wonderful.
yes.
Oh, yeah. And my mom, I talk about it on the show often. My mom grew up in Walsenburg, and fluent in Spanish. All my grands and my tios and tias, and if she spoke Spanish in school, she was punished. She was hit.
Oh, yeah.
And so I call it internalization of an inferior status.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we grow up thinking that if we speak Spanish, it's bad.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to think we're stupid. Well, we don't realize that we're speaking two languages. We're not just one tongue, we're two. But think about this, and I talk about this, and I'd like your opinion on this. So Spanish is not our native language either.
Well, you're right.
Historically, our language, our religion was not Christianity. It was not of what we see today, and Spanish was certainly not the language we spoke. And you know, we talk about our history being diluted. I think about the conquest and the conquistadores, especially last week after talking to Charlene.
Yeah.
There were two conquests in the Southwest, in South, southern Colorado, and you know, the first time they came in and they took all of the original tongue, you know, they didn't bring any women with them, so they came in and they basically raped their way north, you know, and so what was left was these mestizos, not everybody, but you know, a large population of them, and so we don't even remember that amnesia. That's Chicano, Latino, Hispanic amnesia, and it's not our fault.
Well, I think a lot of times, I think through the times that we've been indoctrinated.
Absolutely.
I do believe that, and I do believe, you know, even when we talk about the Native American, I mean, the whole thing, they always get the short end of the stick. But if you think about the language, you think about, you know, all the mixture of language.
Yes.
It's not because of the Spaniards. You know, they played a part, but we keep forgetting that the Native American definitely. I mean, if anyone. So those are the things that we have to spread or share with the generations.
We have to make people aware.
Exactly. And they don't want to, because I'll be honest with you. For example, if I go to the libraries and I show them my work, they'll say, "Oh no, that's too religious. Oh no, you should probably do it through the church."
Really?
And if I go to the church, they'll say, "Well, I don't know. You know, it maybe should be a little more conservative." But the whole thing is that it's not their fault. It's our fault because it's our job to educate.
True.
It's our job to educate, and it's only through these pieces. And the whole thing is that these pieces, they're the ones that tell the story. So it's not like they can say, well, they're making it up. I mean, and most of these people are elders. And I do believe that elders are like books.
I so agree.
And when they die, their stories
a whole library goes.
You know, this one here that I have, Father Moniz. Father Moniz was in the 1930s. Okay, he grew up in Capolín.
Oh yeah.
Okay. In Capolín, he grew up back then. You know, just how you grew up in the valley. I mean, with being Catholic, wanting to be a musician. He played in the radio station there live, because in those days, I mean, and this one's special because this also has his music.
Oh, wonderful.
And that's the wonderful. Now he's no longer here because he's gone. You know, the beautiful part about that this one really tells you the whole story. He talks about the folklore. He talks about the food, how, you know, I mean, you know, just how it was like to grow up there. And the whole thing, to have the opportunity to have done this documentary. And it was only through the connection of Antonio Esquivel, Dr. Antonio Esquivel, who was vice president of Metro. He's the one that introduced me to Al. He says, you know, Rick, you should really meet Al. And it was through those people that actually that I get that sometimes I get some really wonderful stories. And I have to admit, Al definitely is a good reflection. Anybody who watches this piece will have a really good idea what the Valley is all about, because that's who we are, you know, that kind of stuff. And to think that, you know, growing up, I mean, it wasn't okay to be a dreamer. If you wanted to be you know, have a hobby, that's fine. But
get your head out of the clouds.
Andale. So then, I mean, people like him say he wanted to do this.
Wow.
So, you know, even though that things probably don't work out like we hoped they'd work out, but the whole thing is when you stop dreaming, I believe you stop living.
Yes, I so agree. You know, I talk about a tree. When does a tree stop growing?
Yeah.
When it dies.
Exactly.
You know, I've heard a story about a fruit.
Yeah.
You know, if that fruit is ripe, it's going to rot. It's rotting.
Yeah.
So you can't be ripe. You got to be growing, man.
That's the whole thing.
Yes. You know, and I'm just going to break in and you know, my guest Rick Veal has put together a collection of oral histories from southern Colorado. this is so fascinating. If you go to his website,
DownToEarthMedia.org.
DownToEarthMedia.org.
Yeah.
And you can see little trailers of each one of these little snippets, and just enough to get you to say, well, I'd like to learn more. Very, very interesting. Now, a lot of people aren't using DVD players much anymore. So what format will this be available in?
Well, this, for example, I don't have streaming because it's very expensive.
Yes.
So the whole thing, if you don't have a, let's say, an audience.
Yes.
If you don't have an audience, and then, I mean...
You're telling a story to a wall.
Andale, that's the whole thing. You know, a lot of this stuff can be done on PEC 4 or whatever, the universities or whatever. But the whole thing is because it's a small business. And when you have a small business and your support system is pretty much what you sell and personal investment.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's very tough. I mean, the chances of it being streamed are there. I have the technology to do that. But the whole thing is that there has to be an audience out there.
Yes.
And it's because of your invitation to be here. I mean, this gives me just one more chance to be able, or one more opportunity to promote the work that I'm doing.
Yes, yes. Folks, you are watching KUHS, the stream on Melody Drive. I'm Paul Lane, and this is the Weekend Boost. We are talking to Rick Vigil. He has this collection of oral histories that are so fascinating and so revealing. I think it's so cool to, I always talk about how the culture in the San Luis Valley is unique, and all Chicano Latino cultures in the world, I mean everywhere. And to get a snippet of this, to get the view, this perspective, it's gold. It really is.
Well, what makes it special also, this one here, for example, this one is La Placita de San Rafael.
Yes.
And what's special is there was a teacher, Toby Madrid, and he was a Spanish teacher down in Rocky Ford. Anyway, I asked him, I said, Toby, I need for you to give me an on-camera interview. He says, no, he says, because not everybody wants to do an on-camera interview. And then he wrote the entrance of it. And the motto of the whole thing is that he left where you grew up, but you never forget where you come from.
No doubt.
That's what this whole piece is. And that's true because the economy in those small towns have died. So people have to leave. But the whole thing is what they grew up with is not gone. It's still part. And it's kind of like, you don't have to go to church every Sunday to be Catholic. That's part of who you are. Or the food or the language, whatever that means. You may not use it, but that's who you are.
Yep. And it's ingrained in you.
Andale. That's what it's all about. It's part of who you are. And I really do think that a lot of time, I think that I would say that I won't only say that the Gabacho doesn't understand that, because it is a culture that you have to live it. It's not something that you just, it's who you are.
Yes, it's so true. That's why I say, man, please look at the other side of the coin. This is such a rich part of history that so many people don't know.
No.
What is a good hometown when everyone you know is gone?
Well, that's the
Milagro being filled war.
And it was so special. So when he sent me the letter, I said, Toby, I says, I don't need for you to come and do the interview. I love it. And so I wrote him back, and I said, I'm going to use it. You give me permission to do it. And the whole thing is that it's so true,
Yes.
We come from this little placitas, and we have no choice. A lot of people tend to leave. And a good example is I'm working on a piece now on it's Sinicero, but really now it's called Lobatos. And the person that I'm interviewing, her families came were one of the few families that they were chosen to come from Spain into Mexico, into Santa Fe. And the whole thing is that she was telling me, says, a lot of people had to leave the valley, they had, because,
the harsh winters alone.
Oh, the winters, and if you had a piece of land, you had to harvest it or whatever, and if that wasn't your thing, and then you have to find other ways to be able to make a living.
Yes.
But see, that's what makes it so special. And the whole thing is, like I said, and with today's medium, it's beautiful, because I'm telling you, when I worked in television, and you're working with 3/4 inch or even Betacam, the video eventually would definitely, definitely get, what would you call it, fuzzy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
With digital, I
The
mean,
quality never degrades.
yeah, this stuff will be here 30 years from now. It's going to
Yes.
look the same thing.
Yes.
And that's the beautiful part. And not only the video, but also the audio. You know.
Now let's talk about what does it take to put one of these together? I know that we were talking earlier, and this doesn't just put itself together. This is a work of art. This final product.
Let me tell you, it is a challenge. Well, first of all, a product like this, you've definitely worked with jigsaw puzzles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all little parts. Well, because there's no script to these babies, you know what I mean? There's no script. So you have to take all the interviews and then you got to make sense of all of them. You see what I mean? And not only that, but the cost that goes with, well, first of all, you got to get the talent.
Yes.
And not everybody's going to be have the gift of storytelling.
Yep. Or even want to be on camera.
Or even want to be on camera. So you could spend hours of footage trying to get what you really want. Sometimes you have to go back and reshoot. So once you get that stuff, okay, if you're fortunate enough, and then the time that comes to review it, and then you got to figure out how am I going to do this, and then you have to worry, okay, now I got to do the music. How do I do the music? Because you can't buy it.
Right.
Because it has to be authentic.
Everything's copyrighted.
Exactly. So you don't want to produce something like this, and then somebody comes and says, you know what, that music is mine. So all that work. So all that has to come into account. The graphics, you have to be able, so you have to wear many, many hats. Now, if I was fortunate enough to have a lot of money, and then I could definitely say, okay, well, you know, every person has their own specialty, you know, but that isn't the way it works. The way it works, if you want to do this, you have to do it yourself. So the whole thing is that I was fortunate enough, like I said, with all the recordings that we did growing up, working in television, and then the fact of having my own studio, it's really been a benefit on my part. And what's really special also that my wife Andrea does all my voiceovers. So I don't have to hire somebody. So she's part of that formula that comes into play.
Yes,
and
I understand.
And I look at it kind of like it's a blessing. You know, it's a blessing. And why can't we tell our own story? Why can't people be part of the story, tell the story, produce the story? Why do we always have to have somebody from New York to come and
history told by the victims?
Yes. That doesn't, I mean, we're talented enough. If you think about our culture and everything else, we have that. If you talk about...
Oh my gosh. Yes. I was watching the movie Zorro. I just had to interject. This is a couple of nights ago. I was watching the movie Zorro with Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, her name slips my mind now. Beautiful. Catherine Zeta-Jones played his wife.
Yeah.
And she's Irish.
Yeah.
And it's like, are there that few beautiful, articulate Latina women, or are you is it just media is just racist?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, give us a voice. Let us speak our own voice. Let us speak our own words. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. That came to mind as you were talking.
No, you're right. I was going to show you. Let me see if I get my bag. I was going. Now that we're talking about that, if I have it here. Remember, I was telling you the other day about. Maybe if I can pull it out of here, I should. About Dr. Lacona.
Oh yeah.
And he's from your area. And that is Dr. Lacona.
Okay.
And let me tell you his story. Okay, when the piece on Cesar Chavez came out, and at that time I was doing.
Hold this up just for a minute.
I was doing some work for the Salud Clinics, and he was a founder of the Salud Clinics here in Colorado. And when I told him, I says, you know what? I don't think they did justice to the movie Cesar Chavez. I really didn't. And I said, well, but that's my opinion. It says, one of these days maybe you'll give me an interview. I didn't know he was part of the Chicano movement. I didn't know that out of the area that you're from, and you know the whole medical thing, you know, and the whole thing, you know, I mean, when he says, well, you know, Rick, one of these days we'll, you know, give me an interview or whatever. The sad part about the whole thing is a few months before he died, he says, Rick, you know, I have cancer, and I don't have a lot to live. We did the on-camera interview in one day. And think about this guy, I mean, after everything he's going through, he still was able to focus. But it was important And this piece was a piece that definitely was funded by the CU, the health center, was by Jim Garcia out of Clinica Tepeyac, from quite a few other people that definitely provided some of the funding to put it together. But it would have never been done had not had my studio. Because there's no way. The fundings were not there. And the whole thing is that now he'll go down in history. And I mean, you can see this for free. You can go down to the museum, and they have it within the Chicano exhibit or whatever on their website.
In which museum?
And that's the Colorado History Museum.
Wow.
So they have the Chicano exhibit, and the title of the film is a product of the Chicano movement.
Wow.
And he was a product of the Chicano movement. But nobody knows that, because when we think about our people, we always think of them in the sense of if they're a teacher, if they're a business person, but they never think of them as lawyers and doctors.
Isn't that interesting?
That's
because it doesn't fit the mold.
Yeah, because even growing up, they say, oh, Majito, you want to be a lawyer? I mean, I know it's a good thing, but the whole thing is that's about dreaming. This guy, and you know what happened? The reason he was able to get his doctorate, his story is interesting, because he was able to get his doctorate. Mexico and the United States made a treaty. They chose, I think it was 5 Chicanos to go and get their doctorates out of the university in Mexico. So his discipline was healthcare. But that was the deal, and then they had to provide, I don't know, a year or two of giving back to Mexico.
Yes.
But that's how he was able, because in those days there was no funding. I mean, there's no way that Virgilio was going to be able to become a doctor, because it just didn't work out that way. You know what I mean? But the fact that he did it. But the whole thing is now, if you go down to Pueblo, on their curriculum, because this also came because Antonio, remember I told you about Antonio Esquivel? He's the one that helped me do a study guide. He also helped me some of the other materials that educators can use. And now they're using that within the schools. So that's what these pieces have to end up in the universities and should end up in the schools. The hard part with the schools is they already have their curriculum, so they're not even
they're not open to new.
No, the teacher's going to say, I've got too much to do, because when I talked to Virgilio's wife, because she's a teacher, she says, Rick, we got to teach him math, you have to teach him reading, culture and all that stuff is second we can, because this is more important. But the fact is that if these pieces don't get up in the university, they don't get into where they're exposed to learning, libraries, I mean, everywhere. I mean, that's where they need to be, because they have to be used, because it's like a movie. If you see a movie once and then you put it away, these should be learning tools.
Wow.
That's what they should be. They shouldn't just be entertainment. It's okay to be entertained, but you also have to learn something out of it.
Some substance.
Yes. That was the whole point. When I first did this piece, I said to myself, well, if somebody watches it and then they put it on the shelf, and then it's just going to collect dust.
Right.
So I'm always an advocate for education. Not that I was such a good student in school. I wasn't. I have to admit, I was one of those students that I think spent more time dreaming than paying attention. You know what I mean? But that's by nature. You know
that's
what I mean?
all right too. That's okay.
But that's okay, because see, the whole thing is that especially like today, people don't dream anymore.
No.
And the whole thing is you have to dream, because we all have something special. When you were talking about Charlene and you talk about the genealogy, I mean, we all go back. And if we think whether we're carpenters, plumbers, architects, or whatever, that came from somewhere. It just didn't magically just happen. And that's what, the other day, I've been wanting to do some presentations with some people from the genealogy library in the universities, to let teachers know how important it really is. Students have to know, why should I even learn this? And it's really interesting, because I know you've seen the movie Stand and Deliver.
Absolutely.
And Edward James said, don't you guys know that the Mayans,
the concept of zero,
that kind of stuff, but see,
one of my favorite movies. I love that.
Yeah, but we're so caught up with wanting to be what's on TV, and what's TV is not really us. And a lot of times, I have to admit, they kind of water it down. They water a lot of that stuff down.
Oh my gosh, it's like I could watch a program and there's a Chicano in there and you notice them using poor slang, and it's like, I bet you the directors told them, you know what, you can't sound articulate on this.
Yeah.
You have to sound stupid.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Because we don't fit the stereotype. I was watching a program the other night and they had a Latina woman on there, and in the end of the story she says, oh yeah, I used to break in houses. When she doesn't, she says it with like an Anglo.
Yeah.
But they had to put the stereotype figure in the movie to fit their narrative, I guess. And it's time that we really wake up and look at the big picture. Yesterday, I went and saw the movie Till, and I'm just thinking off, while we're talking.
Yeah.
And I was devastated. I mean it, Rick. I was devastated. I left there. I had a lump in my throat all day.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I mean, besides the brutality and the reality and the injustice and and the racism and everything that was involved in the movie. The thing that really stuck with me when I left there is the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill.
Yeah.
It was proposed in 1955 when he died. It just passed.
Yeah.
This year. It took 67 years.
Yeah. And
so, what narrative do we want to fit?
Yeah.
And we are writing our own story.
Well, that's the whole thing. When Columbine, when that whole thing happened with Columbine.
Yes.
And if you go to my Facebook, you'll get to see the video, My Hometown. Mm-hmm. And I had written that song because it was touching, because at that time I was working for Rocky Mountain Center. We had a Head Start Center called Columbine. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, no, this thing was to happen there. But no, it was at the high school. Mm-hmm. But the whole point is that music was never used for Columbine. Mm-hmm. So when Uvalde happened, okay, mm-hmm. I thought, well, I'm going to share the music. Not so much the video, but the music, because it really is, if you listen to the lyric, it's so special. Mm-hmm. The voice was done by a Head Start teacher. Mm-hmm. The whole thing, and you know what? I can't seem to get that piece of music to those families. And that's so sad, because the whole thing is that it wasn't like I'm trying to market it.
Yeah.
What I was trying to do is, look, I got this piece of music. I think it reflects of what you're going through.
It's apropos.
And that's why it's called My Hometown. Mm. So the whole thing is that when we look at that, but if it would have been done, let's say from a gabacho, and I hate to use that word, but anyway, nonetheless, it would have had different results.
Wow.
It would have.
It's a sad truth.
I mean, that's the reality of it, and it's not being racist or anything. It's just that's real. That's who we are.
Oh yeah.
And no matter whether you go to the university or you go whatever, they want to put you in a box.
Yep.
And this is all you can do. And I was really glad last summer, the Su Teatro, they do the film. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate that they chose this one to highlight with some of the other short films they did. Mm. That was such an honor for me, because I got to actually have it out there.
Right.
You see what I mean? And then I thought, well, this year when I met up with Virgilio's wife, I says, I really would like to be able to see, if they're interested, I'd like to submit this film for the festival. You know what I mean? Mm. Because I really think that if we don't share what our people do, and then nobody else is going to do it. Because you already know Denver has all these film festivals, and there's very, very, I mean, it's very hard to get to even have your stuff submitted. Mm. I mean, they'll it's very difficult.
It's very restrictive.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like they want this, and it's very difficult. Or let's say that public television wants to have it. But public television also has the regulations. They also have, if you submit something to public TV, for example, they have their contracts where once you submit it and they say that they're going to air it, you can't do anything with it for a while. And then not only that, but once they see it, and then most people say, well, I already seen it. That's why it has to end up in the classroom.
Yes.
That's why it has to end up at churches. It has to end up in nonprofits. It has to end up wherever the topic of our culture and our spirituality has to play a part.
Yes. And
if it's not there, and then it's a losing battle.
Absolutely. Guys, you got to go to downtooearthmedia.org. Downtooearthmedia.org. Look at this website. Thumb through it. Order your copy of this historical collection, because it's worthwhile. It's very, very informative. It's very, very eye-opening, and it's just something that I think really, like you say, it could be in a university. It could be in a studies, a Chicano studies class. Because these are real people. These are real stories. La Misión de San Miguel.
That one is special, and I'll tell you why it's special. I know you grew up in Walsenburg.
No, I grew up in Denver. My mom was from
Denver. Your mom. Well,
but I was born there, but I grew up in Denver.
But I'm sure they told you stories of what it was like growing up when somebody died.
Oh, yeah.
And the hardships that they had to create their own coffins.
Dig the grave.
The graves in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
But you know what was so special is families came together.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. If somebody died, I mean, the opening of the grave, you don't see that anymore. The opening of the grave, it's kind of like in Mexico, El Dia de los Muertos, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I worked for Univision, they wanted to do a story down there, so they wanted to send me down there. And I really didn't want to go because, we have a whole different outlook of death, very morbid.
Mm-hmm.
But the Mexicans don't.
Mm.
They take it, it's about remembering your ancestors, it's about your dead, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is that's what's special. We can't be a can of soup. Mm. Because the whole thing is you have to remember where you come from, because how are you going to know where you're going?
Exactly. Man, that's so interesting. I do a lot of coaching, and I've been coaching a couple of people right now that are getting some really good results. But one of the things that I start out talking about is the fifth point on the compass. What's the most important point on the compass? It's not north, it's not south, it's not east, it's not even west. It's where you are now.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to do. We need to find out who we are.
Well, that's the whole thing, Paul. The whole thing is that a lot of people that I've come across that are Chicanos or whatever, it's in their 30s that they start realizing, who am I? Because they spend most of their time getting educated or whatever, and then they don't know who they are. Dr. Lacano told me one time while we were out filming one time, she says, Rick, he says, that house down there, that guy went to school with me, and he's a surgeon. Mm. He's making a lot of money. Mm. But he, in other words, decided to go back to his community and provide the services to his community. Mm. So who do you think at the end of the day, when death is at your doorstep, you're going to be able to say, well, what did you do with your life?
Yes.
And the whole thing is you have to say, you know what, I did the best that I could with what I had. Mm. And that's the whole thing, because it's not always about the material stuff. It's not about fame and all that. The whole thing, if I could, if I had one goal that these pieces could do for me is to generate the funding that I already invested, and that it would be in the hands of educators. Mm-hmm. Because without the educators, these materials just become a library that ends up getting dust, collecting dust. That's basically what it all comes down. But if it's up to us to be able to promote our work, whether it's books, whether it's music, we have to, because if we don't do that, then we can't do it alone.
And that's something that really needs to be handed down. It needs to be passed on.
Yes.
Yes. I remember being a young man and talking to my Aunt Bernice, and she was my mom's sister, and she would have been in almost 100 by now if she hadn't passed. Yeah. But she used to tell me stories of Walsenburg when she grew up there, and her uncle used to, her uncle used to go and tell her, hey, give me all the Prince Philip cans you can get. Yeah. This is back in the 30s and 40s, and she would go get all the Prince Albert cans. He'd give her a nickel for each one. She never thought about it, but her uncle was going in the bedroom and doing something with those cans, and then he would disappear for a few weeks, and he'd come back with all kinds of money. So the marijuanos were in my family a long time ago. But that's, there's part of our history that it's never going to be passed down, and it's dark, but it's true.
It's true, man. Like the whole thing it's all herbal medicine. Check this out. In the 70s, if you smoked pot, you were a marijuana. Yeah. That was it. Oh, how fast things change
the stigma.
now.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now, well, you can have it for this or whatever. Yeah. But who's behind it all? It's the same thing with Mexican food. Taco Bell, they're the ones that know how to market, and they're the ones that cash in.
Yeah, and then, it's not the quality of the food.
So that's the whole thing when you think about it. But the reality, if we don't support each other, and then
Thank you.
When was the last time that here in Denver that there was a conference that really focused on the Southwest?
Never. Not that I don't know of any.
That's one of my goals. I was telling the people at the genealogy library, I said, you know, we have to work on something like that. We have to put a conference. I think Pueblo does something of that nature with their genealogy there in Pueblo. I'm not sure. But I said, you know, Denver's huge.
Oh, yeah.
And the population is huge, and how could that not be? How could that not be? And I just wondered, I said, no, that's one of my goals that I really would like to, because there is so many talented people.
A huge population from the Southwest, Colorado.
There are writers, producers, artists, all kinds. I mean,
authors, there's just leaders, just all, there's lawyers, there's all kinds of leaders, you know.
That kind of stuff. I mean, and the whole thing is that there's a, you know, I mean, we could think of Ken Salazar, okay? Which, you know, I mean, definitely he's an icon. But there's a lot of Ken Salazar's out there that nobody knows about.
There's out there, man.
Exactly. So the whole
there's
thing.
Henry Archuletas. Ramon del Castillo. I mean, there's so many names of people. Arturo Jimenez. Oh my gosh.
All those.
Yes.
And the whole thing is that they die, and you think, and nobody knows, and the only way to keep them alive is through education.
Yes.
It's only through education, and it has to be willing for teachers to do that.
Yes.
But it's so political that only in the university, and even then, and it shouldn't only be in Chicano studies. It really should be in history, because this is about history. This isn't just about. I mean, it should be in the Chicano studies, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't just be cornered within, you know, that discipline, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It should be in history, because
it really should.
It really is, because if you think of all the inventions and everything else that down the road we probably haven't even gotten the credit for, but they're there, you know, they're there, and the whole thing is that it's our job to do it. But a lot of people say, "Oh, when I retire, I'm going to do it." Well, sometimes there's no time, because by the time you retire, you're burnt out already.
You know, when I took this show on, we were talking earlier, I was retired. You know, I had no intention or desire to do anything, and you know, I got to tell you, I love being on this show. I love being able to expose and share with, you know, people who have so much to say. And retirement doesn't mean you're dead, guys.
Well, that's the whole thing, because think about it. You know, I mean, the whole thing, because you're a writer or whatever, you have to continue to do it. The whole thing is till it's time to go. You got, because I mean, you can only watch so much TV. You could walk the dog so many times. I mean, or you can travel the world so many times. But there's something that you got to feed the spirit. And the Native American will tell you that you got to feed the spirit.
Yes.
And the spirit is, if you don't feed it, it's like anything else. It's like a flower, you know. If you don't feed it, and that nourishment could be writing, it could be music, it could be whatever it may be.
It could be storytelling. It could be.
That's the whole thing, and we have to broaden things.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times they tend to pigeonhole our history. You know, they'll say, well, we're going to talk about La Llorona. Okay, that's just one, but there's many others.
We're so dimensional. Oh my gosh.
When we think about the Curanderas, that's what I really liked about Bless Me Ultima. That was another book I really liked, because
yes.
And if he ever did, you know, all the books he ever did, that's the one that definitely people will always.
Everybody remembers.
Because that's the whole thing, and that's part of who we are. Ramon del Castillo will tell you, you know, because that was one of his studies, you know. And I think he did his thesis on for his doctorate.
Yes. Yeah.
So he knows about that kind of stuff, and so the whole thing is. But if you look at it from the other side of the coin, well, it's no, that's witchcraft. That's whatever.
Yeah. Oh, it's evil.
Oh yeah.
I was taught that, man. You can't talk that. That's really bad.
Well, if you think about it.
Well, it makes me feel better, but it's bad.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like the plant Osha.
Oh.
Okay.
Grew up on it. I got a bag of it at home.
It's so strange. I did a piece with Metro on Osha. And the professor wanted for me to take her down where.
Wait, before we go, for context, what is Osha?
Osha is an herb.
Bear root. They call it bear root.
Yes, exactly. And there's two different types. There's a type that grows up at a higher elevation, which is the best, because for some reason it's the most potent or whatever. And then you got the ones that are, let's say, like down in the valley. But I mean, it's used for so many things.
Oh my
you know?
God, yes.
And the whole thing is that's part of everything else. Where you talk about marijuana, you talk about any of that kind of stuff. It falls into the same place. You know?
And it's been in our culture for centuries.
And well, think about it. All these drugs that have come out, these drugs just didn't pop up.
Yep.
And then what they do is they take the extract or whatever and
They synthesize it?
Ándale.
Yes, yes, and they profit from it because they can patent that.
Well, and then the sad part, let's take marijuana, for example. They're not using the natural marijuana anymore. What they're doing
It's
is
all hybrid. It's GMO. I hate to say it, but everything you're smoking now is GMO, guys.
It's synthetic. It's the whole thing. It's a chemical.
Yeah.
So it's not what it was supposed to be intended. But it's because, like you said, it's all about money.
Yes, yes.
It's about volume, and it's so sad because the whole thing is that people are making money out of it, out of something that is so special. I would say to the Native American and Latinos community. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, if you look deep in our bodies, you'll see we have receptors that are cannabinoid receptors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like this is a plant that was literally made for us. And if you go to 1910 and you look at any medical journal, hemp was always listed in remedies for everything from rheumatoid arthritis to seizures to everything in between.
Yeah.
But what happened was when Rockefeller came in and the allopathic medicine came in, which is the American Medical Association, and I'd love to talk about that. That's a really good topic. But what I want to talk about before, because we're running out of time, unfortunately, the Reagan era. Ronald Reagan, well, actually Richard Nixon started out with the war on drugs, and then Ronald Reagan came in where he had a just say no to drugs, and George H.W. Bush came in, and the CIA was bringing in cocaine into the United States while they were going out and training death squads down in South America, and they were assassinating democratic leaders and replacing them with dictators. The United States government was doing this, bringing in cocaine, dropping it off in poor white, black, and brown neighborhoods, and then criminalizing cocaine.
Yeah.
And in 1984, they started private prisons.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yep.
We have over 40 private prisons, over 45 private prisons in America today. What does that mean? They're contracted to be full.
Yeah.
The government contracts with them, and they have to be full. So they got to find someone to criminalize.
Yeah.
Guess who is most convenient?
Oh, yeah.
You and me.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Emmett Tills of the world.
Yeah.
There was easy target.
Yeah.
And forgive me, I don't want to get too careful.
No, you're right, because the whole thing is that, first of all, we don't have the monies. If you think about Donald Trump, he can keep spending money and whatever.
Never going to face justice. Never.
Yeah, so we have no choice. I mean, a lot of times we end up, well, a good example, talking about those prisons, look at the one that they built up in Walsenburg.
Oh.
They went and built it, right? And then they decided to close it. So that means that whole economy of Walsenburg.
That was dependent upon that DOC.
Yeah. So the whole thing is that it's all political. And it's not really benefiting the community.
No.
They make it sound like that, but
it's capitalism. I'm sorry, it's the worst part, the dark side of capitalism. Yeah. There has to be a loser.
Yeah.
And the loser doesn't write the history books.
Yeah.
But you know what? We were neither the loser nor had we failed, because all the efforts to extinguish our ancestors failed.
Yeah.
Because here we are.
Well, when you think about the Ukrainians, what they're going through.
Oh, man.
That is a good example.
Yep.
Those are people that say, you know what, I'm not going to bend down to you, these people. You guys are wrong. And the whole thing is, in our case, we have to continue to write books. We have to continue to do this stuff. But we also have to expand. And that's where I think to be able to have these conferences, this is important to have them here in Denver. I really, really do. And we shouldn't have to say, well, this is just going to be just for books, or this is just going to be for music. It should be all around.
Cultural.
That's what
Broad
it
spectrum,
should be. And if it's spirituality, if it's culture, if it's language, whatever that may be. Because the whole thing is that, another thing we have to remember is that we're all different. The people from Guatemala are different than the people from
Honduras or El Salvador or Mexico. Yeah.
Because, the Gabacho thinks that because everybody speaks Spanish, whatever, that we're all the same.
They're all Mexican.
Yeah. We're not.
No.
I mean, we have a lot of similarities, but at the same time, there's a lot of differences, you know what I mean? The music and everything else. So the whole thing is that it's our job to be able to put these pieces together. And without envidia, but with the intention of promoting each other. And if you have something you can do, and then you should be able to say, you know what, let me help you out. because that's how it all works. Because if you remember growing up, it was a bartering system. If you live in a small community, you work.
Everything was barter.
Yeah, the mechanic would fix your car, and if you're a carpenter, you
fix his fence.
Yeah,
you hung his windows for him.
That's the way.
Or her windows for him.
Exactly. Now it's kind of like if you don't have the money, and then I can't go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the way it works. A lot of the work that I do, I mean, remember when they did the whole thing, the pipeline down in, was it South Dakota, North Dakota?
Yeah, I know the Dakota pipeline. Yeah.
So they asked me, said, will you do a public service announcement for me, the people here in Denver? And you'll see that also on my Facebook. If you click on my Facebook, you'll see a lot of the other
What's
work.
your Facebook?
The Facebook it's also, if you go on my downtoearthmedia.org, click on that link.
Facebook, yes.
Click on that link, and you'll get to see stuff that's done in healthcare, whether it's in, a variety. So this stuff here is because it's the stuff that I'm putting together. But there's a lot of stuff that I've done in the past that is community-based. And that's, we can't always be just about ourselves. We have to get
gotta have some grassroots.
That's
I want you to know that when when the time comes and you get this going, man, come to me, because I want to get that out to the community. Guys, before I forget, go to downtoearthmedia.org. Order at least one. Order one of these today. And if you aren't fascinated with it, if you aren't entertained, if you aren't educated, informed, I guarantee you will be. You want to order another one. Go to Down to Earth Media. Order a copy of one of your oral histories of Colorado's Southwest. Rick Vigil is a hero. I talk about it. Everybody's looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, here's one. Here's one. I love what I do here because the heroes are always in this place talking to me.
Well, that's the wonderful. I mean, there's a conduit. I mean, for the longest of time, we're kind of like saying, where can I go? And the whole thing is when you invited me to come, I told my wife, I said, I got to take advantage of this because it doesn't. I mean, it's not like it's all over the place, So that's why it was important for me to be here. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I can't do it alone. This is about community. This is about finding people that support this work. And this is all about oral history. Really, really is. The work that I'm doing is about the people. That's what it's all about. And it's not, in this case, it happens to be the collection that I'm doing because that's where I grew up. But if you go into my Facebook, you'll see that I'm always an advocate for not only for the people in the valley, but Hispanics overall.
Nice. I was talking earlier about heroes, and I mentioned all males, and I apologize for that. Juana Bordas, Beatrice Montoya, Virginia Sanchez, Kimberly Sanchez. There's been so many women that have been on the show that have been heroes and just wonderful, not just contributors, but activists and people who are really making a difference.
Yeah.
And when all this time passes and all of our bodies are dead in the ground, this history will remain.
Yeah.
And this culture needs to be shared. It needs to be learned. It needs to be remembered. And these faces, the Dia de los Muertos, you know what they do? They remember the people who have passed and they honor them.
Well, that's the whole thing. The whole thing is that, like I said earlier, if we don't know where we come from, we're not going to know where we're going. That's all there is to. And getting back to our elders. I mean, a lot of times we're living in a world where our elders get old, and my mom would always say, at the time that you can't be moving the pants, they want to send you away, put you away. You know what I mean? That isn't the way it works. We grew up in the sense that we took care of our elders. They came and they lived. My grandfather lived with us. I mean, that was special.
Oh man!
And the whole thing is that's family, and that's what it's about. You know what I mean? It's not about having 3 houses, 5 cars, and that kind of stuff.
That's one of the things that I think is being lost in assimilation is that the old tradition of the grandmothers and grandfathers stayed with you till their die. You took care of family too, and now we put them in nursing homes, and we're assimilating into this system, and it's really sad. I mean, there's new dynamics that the rate of Alzheimer's disease and the level of care that someone may need. I mean, there are exceptions, but we have a rich tradition that is wonderful to keep.
It is. On the one that I'm working on now, I interviewed a lady. She was 101. And she says, it's time for me to go. You know what I mean? But the fact that she gave me the story, she gave me her story, that is what's special.
That is so cool.
That's another thing that's really hard, especially with our culture, is a lot of times we don't want to share. And it's not because we don't want to, it's just we feel that it's not important. A a lot of times, that's old stuff. But it isn't old stuff.
Yeah.
It's special. You know, the
It
whole
is.
thing-
It's once it's here, and it's treasure.
Yeah, it's
really
a
is.
treasure. They don't see the value of it because I think the indoctrination, all that stuff that came to be.
Yes.
But I really do think so. So when I have the opportunity to speak about it, I'm definitely an advocate. I mean, they always say, if you're going to do sales, you better do sales on something you believe in.
Yep.
Because, I mean, I couldn't sell cars, so I'll be
Oh, yeah.
honest with you,
Oh, yeah.
but I can sell this because I believe in it, and I believe in the people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And whether it's here in Denver, whether it's in Albuquerque, or whether it's in the Valley, it doesn't matter, because we all pretty much have the same upbringing, I would say, one way or another, you know?
Oh. There's so many things that we can talk about. There's someone out there right now who's considering writing a book, or starting a project like this that seems monumental to them. They don't know how they're going to get the graphics done. They don't know how they're going to get the audio done or the editing. They don't know what the music's coming from. They don't have any idea how they're going to write the first word of their book, but they want to do it.
Yeah.
If you have a desire, I'm going to give you this phrase. I learned it when I was 21 years old. I'll never forget it. Whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. Get a dream. Write it down. Make it happen. Be a hero. Guys, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. This is KUHS, the stream on Malady Drive. I am Paul Lane, your host, and we've been talking to hero Rick Vigil, San Antonio resident, actually a Denver resident now, but a hero who has put down the oral history of Southwest Colorado, Latino Chicano heroes of our past. Some are here, some are gone, but downtoearthmedia.org is where you can access and reach this wonderful treasure of information. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. It's just an honor to have you every week on the show. Those of you who follow us regularly, I just don't even know how to thank you. Quick announcement. On the 3rd of November, Dee Ruby became my wife.
Oh, congratulations.
And so, Dee, I love you. I'm glad I married you. We've been married a week now, but it's a wonderful thing, and I'm glad I've done it. And I just want to make that announcement. Got a little bit off the show. Well, I've got a few minutes here. I don't know why I looked at that. It looked like it was
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that I think in order to be able to bring more attention, we really do have to have a reason why. We have to have the ganas, like you were saying. If you have no ganas, you can have all the education you want. But if you don't have the ganas
Oh
and
my
they're
gosh.
willing to dream and willing, because you're going to have a lot of doors closed. I can't, I mean, there's so many doors, they say, no, for whatever reason you shouldn't do it, or it's too early, it's too late. You have to do it. If your heart tells you to do it, you got to do it. That's all there is to it,
Yeah.
regardless of what anybody else to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the next Edward James Olmos or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is about fulfilling whatever you feel you want to fulfill.
Truly.
Whether it's your dream, whatever you're doing, that's what matters. What are you doing for the community that you grew up with? I mean, the stories, like I said, stories can be in books, it can be paintings, it can be in a variety of things. So the whole thing is that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself to just one thing. You have to find your talent, but that's where we go to genealogy, that's where we go with where our roots are, So I really, really do think if nothing gets out of this place is that it's not about fame, it's about education.
Truly.
It's about education, because the fame all comes and goes. We don't remember their names or whatever, but in education, they're there. And we're doing something special for the generations of today and the generations of tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And I would say that is the goal.
I've heard it said that you can do great things if you don't care who gets the credit.
Because if you're in it for the credit, and then I mean, maybe this isn't the field to go into. I mean,
you talked about why. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about all of the people he saw in this. He was in a concentration camp, and so many people would die, and he would look at them and analyze them. He was a psychiatrist, and he realized that those who died had no reason to live. Those who live, they live because they're going to find their wife, they're going to find their children, they're going to get justice on the people who imprison them. They're going to get their business back. Whatever the reason, they have a why.
Yep.
Find a why.
That's it. Because the whole thing, if you're thinking that, okay, once I get here and then I'm done, that isn't the way it works. It's a life.
Yes.
It's a road. I mean, the whole thing that you have to just travel it to the very end.
Yep.
And the whole thing is that you have to fight every day. And not everybody's going to be receptive to it. But as long as you believe in what you're doing, that's what
You
matters.
can make it happen.
Yeah, because
Yes.
the whole thing is that's the bottom line. But, we do have to be able to support each other.
Thank
One
you.
way or another, we
Thank
have to learn to support each other. And I think this, giving me this opportunity, this platform is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, again, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. I'm your host, Paul Lane, and you are on KUHS, the stream on Melody Drive. We've been talking to hero Rick Vigil. And stay tuned for Mr. International, Paul Chavez, to put on some wonderful music for you. And stay tuned to KUHS through this day, through the night, because the music never stops coming. The entertainment never slows down, and this is the place to be. Thanks for joining us, guys. I love you all.